In this video, we're going to look at how we can take the quite abstract concepts that underlie English tenses and make them more manageable for learners by using visual prompts in the form of timelines. Timelines help us to fix the concepts of tenses onto a clear visual representation using time as a line and the actions which happen during that time as displayed happening along that line, so putting them in context with one another. Timelines are useful because they present pure concepts of tenses. They don't require any of the new language which we're teaching to learners, thereby confusing them about the new ideas that they're learning. So useful to isolate the concepts of the tenses before we go on to present the examples of the tenses being used. Timelines also contextualize these concepts, which can be quite abstract if you don't fix them with a visual or a meaningful aid to help students comprehend them. They show the relationships between actions visually, and we can include different types of action or event or time reference with little pictures, with diagrams, and we can help students understand the relationship between these in sentences easily and kind of in a fun way, rather than just concentrating on sentences and word examples, which can get boring. Also, timelines can be built along with the students to help them demonstrate their own understanding of the concepts behind tenses. Don't feel that you have to stand at the front of the room presenting these timelines on your own, but ask the students to help you fill them in and add the details that they can see in the sentences, and thereby checking and confirming their understanding of the concept. So, let's have a look at some timeline examples and the types of action that we can show. So here's an example of time moving forward. We usually show it as an arrow going from left to right. And the action that we display on this line depends on the aspect of the tense that we're teaching. For example, verbs with a simple aspect, a continuous aspect, and a perfect aspect are displayed slightly differently to show students exactly the concept that we mean when we talk about these different aspects. So simple actions. If you remember from the last video, simple actions are seen as complete or total units, and they cannot be interrupted by other actions. So for this reason, we display simple actions as a cross, or a line, or a point on the line. All of these you can see have very small, very narrow points where they hit the timeline itself. So this implies that nothing else can happen within that action. It's complete and total and just happens. Continuous actions, by contrast, are seen as incomplete at a specific time, and these can be interrupted, which means that we need to open them up to investigate what happens inside continuous actions. For this reason, we often show continuous actions as having a start point and an end point at different places on the line. And then we can show the action happening from the beginning to the end. And you can see that that space in between the two vertical lines represents the duration of the action which is going on. And we can have other actions which happen within that. So, for example, we could say that I was walking down the street, past continuous, when I saw an accident. Or I was walking along the street when I realized that I'd left my keys at home. So again, the realizing and the seeing interrupt that walking action. The walking is not finished when the seeing or the realizing happens. So for that reason, those are simple actions, realized and saw. So a perfect tense is represented by one action being shown in relation to another time or action or event. So let's use a line here to signify a time, a point in time, and a cross there to represent a simple action. So a present perfect simple action would still have a simple diagram on there on the left. That cross represents the simple action. So we can say that the simple action, the cross, happens in relation to the line, the time. For example, in the present perfect simple sentence, I've eaten breakfast, that would be eaten breakfast, and the line would represent now. So I have eaten breakfast right now. Present tense, because we're seeing that action in terms of the moment of speaking, or now. In a past perfect simple tense, we could talk about something had been finished, or someone had finished the job before another point in time, which would be in the past. For example, midday yesterday. So we can say that by midday yesterday, he had finished the job. We're seeing finishing the job in terms of that time happening after it. So perfect actions can also be shown by an action happening before another action. For example, in the sentence, the film had started, just as before, the previous action is the perfect one. The film had started by the time we arrived. So here we've got a past simple action referring back from the past simple action to the past perfect action. So you can see there's a relationship between those two actions in time. So very simple. We can use crosses, lines, points, arrows, and they all display different aspects of how we see the tense. So how do we draw a timeline? Well, the first step, if we want to fix an action in time, is to identify where now is. Now is always a good starting point, because now is now, right? The students all share an understanding of now, and that helps to put the actions that we're teaching into a context. So with present tenses, we would put now in the middle of the line, because present tenses tend to describe things which are happening right now or around now. So we need lots of space on the left and the right on our line to show different actions and times and events. In past tenses, the now point should be towards the right of the timeline, so that we have plenty of space on the left, which represents the past, so we can show different things happening in the past. And if we want to show future forms, we should do the opposite, right? The now point should be on the left, and then we have lots of space for us to draw things on the right-hand side, or the future of our timeline. So let's have a look at present tense. Firstly, you mark the now, for example here in the middle, because it's a present tense, and then you would elicit the action marks with contextualized questions to students, asking them to give you the information about when things are happening. And you can also use CCQs, or concept checking questions, to check that they're understanding exactly when this is happening. So, for example, we would say, okay, in the sentence, I am teaching you how to draw a timeline, when did I start teaching you? In the past or in the future? Well, it's in the past, so I started teaching you there. And am I still teaching you now? Yes, so the action is still going on now. And will I teach you into the future? Yes, I haven't stopped yet, so it goes past now and on into the future. Okay, so that's the concept of present continuous, started in the past and continues through now and on into the future, not finished now. And then finally, you can decorate your timeline with little notes, little verbs, pictures, arrows, and everything to help them remember what's going on. So, for example, here I started teaching in the past, and I'm still teaching now, so we can put that on there. And I haven't said when we'll finish, so finishing is in the future somewhere. So we can show that with some little question marks or a little note there, finish teaching. And that gives us the whole context without using the target language, but just the pure concept of the present continuous tense. Okay, we'll look at lots more practice of this for each of the different tenses in the future videos. But for now, time to reflect. So think back to a tense-related task that you've taught recently. Think about practicing timelines for the different sentences and the examples that the task gives. Decorate them with lots of relevant aspects. Don't just use the actions and the verbs. Think about little pictures, think about little prompts to help the students remember. And in the class that you taught, did your students really process all of those aspects that you've planned this time round in the lesson that you taught? Why or why not? How can you make it better? How did you address them at the time? And what questions could you ask, or how could you elicit these aspects in future when you teach that lesson again?